I set 2 plates on the table for 6 months after she left. Not on purpose. My hands just did it. Reached into the cabinet, pulled down 2 of everything, set the second place across from an empty chair. Every single night, for half a year, I'd catch myself halfway through and just stand there, looking at a plate meant for someone who wasn't coming back. This is a letter for the men whose hands haven't caught up to what their minds already know. Nobody warns you that a shared life gets written into your body, not just your memory. Muscle memory doesn't check a calendar. It doesn't know she moved out in March. I'd start the coffee maker for 2. I'd drive past her favorite grocery store instead of the closer one out of pure habit. I'd roll toward the middle of the bed at 2 a.m., expecting resistance that wasn't there, and wake up disoriented in a space too large for one person. Those habits weren't sentimentality. They were just physics. Years of repetition, still running on autopilot, long after the reason for them had walked out the door. Of all of it, the second plate hit the hardest, and I've thought a lot about why. It wasn't a photograph I could put in a drawer. It wasn't a text I could delete. It was an action my own hands took, every single night, without permission from the rest of me. Proof that some part of me hadn't gotten the message yet, or had gotten it and simply refused to comply. Standing there some nights, holding a plate meant for someone who wasn't coming, I felt less like a man grieving a relationship and more like a man watching his own body grieve something his mind had already tried, unsuccessfully, to move past. Every habit like that had to be unwound, individually, deliberately, because none of them would fix themselves just because time was passing. I had to consciously buy fewer groceries. I had to consciously reroute my drive. I had to consciously reach for 1 plate instead of 2 every single night until my hands finally believed what the rest of me already understood. That's a specific kind of storm. Not one dramatic loss, but 1,000 small mechanical corrections, each one a fresh reminder of exactly what wasn't there anymore, repeated until the correction itself became the new habit instead of the absence. For a while, I'd let the second plate happen because stopping it felt like a decision I wasn't ready to make. As long as my hands kept setting 2 places, some quiet, irrational part of me got to keep pretending this was temporary. Correcting the habit meant admitting, in a small, physical, undeniable way, that it wasn't temporary, that the second plate wasn't coming back to use. That was a harder admission than any conversation, any legal document, any conscious thought I could have, because it had to happen with my hands, alone, every night, with nobody there to witness or soften it. The night I finally stopped was unremarkable in every way, except the decision itself. No dramatic trigger. I just reached for the cabinet, caught myself mid-motion the way I had 100 times before, and instead of setting the second plate down anyway, I put it back. It felt smaller than I expected, and larger than I expected, both at once. Smaller because nothing visibly changed in the room. Larger because it was the first time my hands had actually agreed with the rest of me about what was true. That's not a cinematic moment. It's the actual unglamorous shape grief takes when it finally starts moving instead of just repeating. If this is landing, hit subscribe, because the discipline of retraining your own habits after a loss like this is harder than the loss itself, and I want to walk through exactly how it's done. This is discipline in a form nobody talks about. Not willpower applied to a goal, but the slow, repetitive correction of a body that learned a life with someone else in it and
hasn't been told, language it understands, that the arrangement has changed. It means noticing the automatic reach and interrupting it every time until interruption itself becomes automatic. It means driving the different route on purpose for weeks until it's no longer a decision. It means physically rebuilding the routines of a life built for one, brick by unglamorous brick, using the exact same repetition that built the old ones in the first place.
I couldn't just remove the old routines. I had to replace them with new ones, deliberately, or the empty space where they used to be just became its own kind of ache. A new morning routine that didn't route past her favorite grocery store. A new way of making coffee that didn't default to 2 cups. A new side of the bed, honestly, because the middle reaching habit never fully broke until I changed which side I slept on entirely. None of that erased what the old routines meant. It just gave my hands something true to do, instead of something that kept quietly lying to the rest of me every night. I used to think the second plate was just a sad habit to get through. Looking back, it taught me something about how deeply another person can get written into the actual architecture of a life. Not just the big moments, but 1,000 small, automatic ones nobody thinks to grieve separately. That's not something to be ashamed of. It's evidence the relationship was real, embedded deeply enough to survive in muscle memory for months after the mind had already processed the ending. The correction was hard, specifically because the original habit had been built on something genuine.
Eventually, 1 plate became the automatic thing instead of 2. My hands caught up, the coffee maker learned a new default. The drive home stopped detouring past a store I had no reason to visit anymore. That man isn't colder for having retrained himself. He's just finally consistent. His hands and his mind finally telling the same true story about his life. Instead of his body quietly running an outdated program his heart had already updated months earlier. So, if your hands are still doing something your mind has already let go of, setting a place that won't be filled, driving a route that doesn't lead anywhere true anymore, know that the correction takes the same patient repetition the original habit took to build. It won't feel dramatic. It'll feel like reaching for a cabinet one more time than you want to, and putting the extra plate back anyway. Do that enough nights in a row, and eventually your hands believe it too. I set 2 plates for 6 months. I set 1 now, without thinking about it at all. That's not the relationship ending. That already happened months before my hands caught up. That's just what healing actually looks like, once you stop waiting for it to feel like something bigger than it is. Elias.